Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at Freudian theories of personality development, and particularly the psychosexual stages and how fixation at those stages will influence personality traits as one ages. So, in a healthy person, the relationship between the id, ego and superego is dominated by the ego, the strongest component of that personality triumvirate, so that they can have the needs of the id satisfied without upsetting the morals of the superego. If the id is dominant in any scenario, then we get impulse control issues, and self-gratification can start taking over a person's life. Where if the superego is the dominant component of that mental relationship there, you're going to get somebody driven by hyper-rigid morals, often overcome with feelings of guilt. They'd be unbending and judgmental type personalities there. So as somebody's personalities are being developed in the first few years of their life, unpleasant childhood experiences can create significant problems and influence those behaviours and personality types as somebody ages. So during childhood, the id is the dominant component of that personality there. It's the part of the personality that's looking for that gratification. Freud's idea was that as a child or as a person grows, they are becoming focused on particular types of pleasure or gratification as they grow, as they get older and experience new things and their body develops. He described these as the psychosexual stages. Freud's theories had a highly sexualized component to them. He felt that everything at some level boiled down to sex and sexual desires. So what I'm going to show you next is the list of psychosexual stages, and it describes where the pleasure was sought from and some of the typical activities that would be occurring in a normal scenario, a normal growth and development stage for any children of that kind of age. So we start with the oral stage. The major tasks or activities that are associated with that stage are about feeding. So that's where an infant, somebody 0 to 18 months old or thereabouts, gets most of their pleasure or their gratification. We then move through the anal, phallic, latent, and then genital stages of the psychosexual development. You can pause the video here to look through that table in more detail, but we'll go through each of the stages one by one here. So the oral stage, this is from birth to about 1.5 years. And the major pleasure zone or erogenous zone is the mouth. And so most of the gratification or joy that the infant would achieve at that point in time is around putting things in their mouth, feeding, chewing on stuff, biting things, sucking things. So this is a pretty obvious thing if you've ever been around a child of this age. Everything wants to go in their mouth. They want to chew on anything they can. So what Freud's idea is this is a natural process that everybody goes through. And if you are able to successfully go through this, learn the skills, get the gratification that you need, and then move on, nothing happens. And you go on and move through the stages. However, if something goes wrong, if the experience at this age is unpleasant, and the specific example here at the oral stage is that you're being weaned too early or too late, that is moved from breastfeeding or bottle feeding towards having to self-satisfy and use a cup or something like that, or seek your own food. If that happens too early or too late, then fixation can occur at this stage. To phrase it another way, the id becomes obsessed with seeking these types of gratification because it didn't happen nicely or naturally at that point in time for them. So an example of how this plays out is if an adult underwent some sort of psychological trauma or bad experience at this oral stage, they'll become fixated, and they're likely to still seek satisfaction through something to do with the mouth. Now, this might be about talking, but this could also be about drinking or eating, smoking, type of habits, something like putting nail biting, which involves putting something into the mouth to seek the pleasure or get that positive response. And this is all down to that childhood experience, according to the Freudian theory. Following on from the oral stage, the next stage of psychosexual development is the anal stage. As the name would suggest, during this time, the relevant erogenous zone is the anal region, and the major activity that's relevant at this point is the toilet training of a child. So during this point in time, the expulsion and retention of feces or urine is the major driving factor here. So the child gets pleasure or gets a reward for being able to hold on to that feces, not going to the toilet all the time, waiting till they're actually at the toilet, or and then when they get there, they get that reward of the going and expelling that feces, doing the poop, whatever. It gives them that pleasant feeling there. So at this stage, there's sort of two aspects to this stage. And this is the one that's most commonly referred to in popular sort of discussion. There is an expulsion stage of this, or an expressive stage, and then there is a retentive stage. So a fixation at the expressive stage tends to result in a destructive or messy type of behaviour pattern. The retentive stage, if a fixation occurs there, this is about controlling, being excessively neat and ordered. Both of these relate to ideas of control. So over control or a lack of control, depending on where that fixation occurred. The third of the psychosexual stages is the phallic stage. This relates to the genital erogenous zones. Specifically, this is around learning and becoming aware of sexual differences, becoming curious about their own genitals and the genitals of others in the household that they may be aware of. This is a bit of a contentious stage in the consequences of fixation here. It certainly created some controversy at the time and continue to do so, because there is a suggestion that at this stage of development, the child can develop a erotic attraction to their parents. So these ideas are known as the Oedipus and Electra complexes. And it's an unconscious desire or erotic attraction, sexual attraction to the opposite sex parents, and a desire to actually eliminate the same-sex parent as competition. So this is a process that is suggested to occur at this point in time. And I'll go through each of these complexes in a little more detail in a sec. But basically the idea is this gets resolved through adoption of sexual identity towards the end of this stage, where the child takes on particular characteristics or behaviours of the same-sex parent, then eliminating their feelings of conflict with them. So the Oedipus complex is specifically related to a boy's attachment to his mother. This is a story, the name at least is from Greek mythology. Oedipus married his mother after killing his father. Big complicated story, interesting tale, but Freud named this particular part of the psychosexual development after this particular story. So part of this is about an attraction to a boy's attraction to their mother. Part of it too is about a slight fracturing of the relationship with their father. Largely this is due to guilt or fear, where the boy unconsciously feels attracted to their mother, is concerned that their father will respond negatively to that, and creates this idea of fear of being castrated, removing the sexual competition. Yeah. It's as weird as it sounds. The way that this one is dealt with in terms of the psychosexual development if somebody becomes fixated at this stage of development, the way this typically would affect their behaviour in adult life is they might become fixated with demonstrations of their manhood, becoming extra macho, super manly, what we might refer to as toxic masculinity these days. The converse one of these, the Electra complex, is a girl's strong attachment or attraction to her father. And this is, again, named after a Greek myth. You can go and dig into that one a bit further if you like. This one is not necessarily motivated by fear from the same-sex parent, but by what's referred to as penis envy. Now, let's just remember that Freud was male, and therefore he's coming in a very male-centered view of the world. And his suggestion here is, and I'll actually just read the quote here. When young girls notice that they are missing a penis, they feel themselves handicapped and envy the boy's possession of it. So that's the idea, that during this stage of development and their sexual identity formation, the girls are jealous of their father's penises. Just let you think about that one for a moment. From there, the resolution to this idea and these negative feelings is the girl repressing or putting away that feeling, identifying with their mother to take on that typical gender role, that mothering, reproductive type role that would be expected at that point in time. So the fixation complex that would come from this is described as women being attracted to older men, taking the place of their father in that type of relationship here. The next stage, is the latency stage here. So during the latency stage, this is the one point in time that Freud thought that people's lives aren't dominated by sexual feelings, and during this time, there's very little gender-based or sex-based play. The children tend to just stick to their own sex peers. So primary school aged children will tend to play boys with boys, girls with girls. There's very little sexual element to any of the games or anything like that. People tend to adopt hobbies or pick up activities during this time. And his idea is this is largely driven by the need for education and development of the mind to be productive in society, as we've sort of seen play out in a few different ways. The final of the psychosexual stages, according to Freud, is the genital stage. This is differentiated from the phallic stage in that it's not all about penises. In this case, this is around, it's essentially the maturation into mature adult type sexual relationships. There is a degree of experimentation at that point in time, but the ultimate resolution of this would be about settling down into a loving one-on-one standard traditional type relationship, because that was the standard to which Freud was expecting people to adhere. Freud's writing around this was very heteronormative, so it is, anything deviating from standard heterosexual attraction was included as a potential source of a consequence of fixation at one of the different stages. So fixation at the phallic stage would result in a desire for self-pleasure or even homosexual attraction because of that obsession with the sexual identity component of it at that point in time. I'll let you read through some of those other consequences of of fixation there. The final thing we'll include in this little video, just another image of the different stages there, and a couple of suggestions on how you can maybe try and remember the order of them if that's confusing you. A couple of mnemonics to include here. Old age pensioners love gardening, OAPLG. Only adventurous penguins love garfish. You can come up with anything else from there. Next one, we're going to have a look at a little bit more of the ideas of how these behaviours become problematic in adulthood, and how the mind tries to deal with some of these issues. Thanks everyone. Bye.